honestly, in a lot of ways, you are what I didn't have growing up. You know, when it comes to attachment and all of that, oftentimes people say like, oh, you marry what you know.
Wow.
And I didn't want to do that because what I knew wasn't healthy. And just from our friendship, I knew what we had was healthy. And what we had was something worth working on, worth fighting for, and just worth having around at all times. And there got to be a point where I just couldn't see what my life would be like if you weren't there. And all of that kind of leads to just being like, well, if you want to seal that in, gotta put a ring on it.
Beautiful day. 70 degrees, which I'm okay with because that's my limit. Here with this beautiful woman. Hello, mi amor.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Going on a nice little walk.
We're gonna go get discounted Valentine's Day chocolate. Stop lying.
That too, probably.
That Ferrero Rocher.
So, as we just passed Valentine's Day, as you call it, February, the month of love, all that good stuff.
Do I really call it that?
I mean, that's what you called it last year, so it's not the first time. That's the language you've used. Okay, I just want to ask you straight up. You ready? All right. What's the benefit or the purpose? Like, why should anybody get married? Like, what's the gift of marriage?
Okay. I don't remember what school it was. I was watching this video about this guy who just got hired on as the lead football coach for a university. I want to say like North Carolina or South Carolina, somewhere. Anyways, he was, of course, thanking everyone, and he was like, of course, last but not least, like he started thanking his wife. And he goes on this whole talk about how, like, when he was ready to give up on his dream, and when he didn't even recognize in himself the talents he had and where it could take him, like, she was the one who stepped in at the gap. She's the one who said, like, hey, we'll do whatever it takes. And that included her working like 2 to 3 jobs at certain seasons of their lives so that he can pursue being a coach. And he was just happy being a high school coach, but she saw something in him that was like way more. Anyways, like, recently he got hired on, and he's been put on as the top lead coach. Sorry, I don't know the language. The head coach, right? Making like tons of money, more than a high school coach could ever dream of. And I remember watching the video and thinking, this is why I love marriage. Because I'm also in another group, like a finance group, where it's one of the questions that often is like, what's the benefit of being married? And I'm just like, that's such a terrible question to ask. Like, what's the benefit of being married? From like a financial context. Right, what can I benefit from if I get married? And I've always hated that question that our group asks. And I just remember thinking, like, man, this is why I love marriage. Marriage has this way of taking 2 people and marinating them together, and just saying like, I see something in you, even when you don't see it, and I'm willing to sacrifice parts of myself, parts of my dreams, to make sure that you reach that, point of life. And it's not just one person doing it, they're both doing it. So, like, it's funny, that's the first question that you asked me, because I literally remember watching that video and thinking, like, man, this is why I love, this is like the best definition of a marriage that just kind of marinates together, where it's not for self-gain, it's not for, any of that. It's how can I, come and make this person's life a little bit, it's mutual submission, it's mutual mutual complementing each other.
So
Yeah, that was a really long answer.
No,
yeah, that's like one
it
of
was
the
a
things
great
I
answer,
love.
though.
That's one of the things I love about marriage is how two people who are so different can come together.
Yeah.
And just make the best of it, and put in that work to make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because I was going to ask, because as you're sharing your answer, one of the things I thought was like, okay, well, you can get support from from anybody. You can get support from mom, dad, siblings, friends, and all that. But you said something specific. You said there's a sacrificial element to it.
Absolutely.
And not that there isn't that in friendships, from parenthood, siblings, family, and all that, but it is a total different level in a marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
it's who was it that said, like, in marriage, if you're always trying to outserve each other, like, it's going to work. Because if you're just like, oh, like, so and so did this, now I like, and not in like a let me get something back, but if your mindset is always like, I am going to outserve my partner, it kind of becomes this good marinade where you're constantly looking out for each other.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's a corny statement, but one of my favorite scenes though in the movie 300 is when they're talking about how they face the enemy and when they go into battle. But something that King Leonidas, which is Gerard Butler's character, says, he says, no person in my ranks fights for himself. He fights for the person to his left and fights for the person to his right.
Yeah.
That truly is what takes place in a healthy marriage.
Right.
And that's essentially what you're saying.
Exactly.
All right, so let's kind of like narrow in on that's what's some of the beauty of marriage itself. Why did you personally get married? Because there was a time, well, let's back it up maybe. There was a time where you weren't even thinking about marriage. You're like, nope, I'm good. I'm going to remain single. I'm going to get the high-rise condo. You were even talking about like adopting at a certain point. Like, I don't need no man. I'm good. So like, what for you shifted and just leaning towards the idea of marriage for you?
I got tired of working, man.
That's a lie.
I needed a sugar daddy, and I was like, you know what? Marriage seems like the answer.
Oh man.
No, it is going back to that story I just said. Trying to repark.
You're good.
It is going back to the story that I just said of two people that complement each other. And I feel like with us, we did that. We never were a crutch with each other. And it was like, hey, this is what I bring to the table and this is what I bring to the table. This is also my weak areas and this is my weak areas. Like, how can we... And I know that sounds so business transactional because there is love there as well.
Yeah.
And I was just telling a friend of mine, I'm just like, I can't even be in relationship with someone who I feel is uncultured, that's unequally yoked for me. So to find someone who understands your culture, is wanting to learn about other cultures, wanting to put in the work of growing, like they're not just satisfied with where they are, and is your biggest champion and cheerleader. Like, I can say that about you've always been my biggest cheerleader and my biggest champion in everything I do. There's nothing that you don't think that I can do. Like, I will come up to you with a new business idea, what feels like every other day, and you're like, yeah, if anyone can do it, it's you. And I'm always all like, well, he's a little delusional, but I appreciate the support, and honestly, in a lot of ways, you are what I didn't have growing up. When it comes to attachment and all of that. Oftentimes people say like, oh, you marry what you know.
Wow.
And
okay.
I didn't want to do that because what I knew wasn't healthy. And just from our friendship, I knew what we had was healthy. And what we had was something worth working on, worth fighting for, and just worth having around at all times. And there got to be a point where I just couldn't see what my life would be like if you weren't there. And all of that kind of leads to just being like, well, if you want to seal that in, gotta put a ring on it.
Man, thanks, babe. That was very kind. One of the reasons I always knew that I wanted to be married, so I guess that's where you and I are a little different.
Yeah, I always knew I wanted to be single.
So for me, I guess I've always valued just companionship. I do want to be clear, and maybe we should have led with this. Singleness equally is a gift.
Yeah.
And that's not something that we're just saying. We really do believe that. That's really where you were at.
Yeah.
And that's actually what attracted me. Oh, here we go. A lesson for both men and women. Doesn't matter if you're a single male or single female. Be content with where you're at. That was actually the number one thing that attracted me to you. Is that it's because you didn't need a man. And I wasn't looking for someone. I wasn't looking for a project. Yeah. I wasn't looking for someone to quote unquote take care of. Yeah. I was looking for a partner.
Yeah.
I was looking for a companion.
Right.
At the time, and I was going active duty, and so I knew I needed someone strong.
Yeah.
I knew I needed someone who wasn't going to be clingy or needy. I knew I needed somebody who enjoys my company but is not dependent off my company.
Right.
And that was one of the things. That was the number one thing that I loved about you. Yeah. You know, was essentially that. And so you provided that for me. What was truly one of the things that attracted me to you is that you were content. And so I just want to speak that over you. It doesn't matter if you're single or married, because here's the thing: if you're not content when you're single, you're not going to be content when you're married. Yeah. You're not going to be content when you find that special person you get in a relationship. I loved that you loved who you are, who you were, and where you're at in life. And I looked at it as I just wanted to be a part of it.
Right.
I didn't look at it as what's something I can do, swoop in and take over. I never felt like that. Yeah. And so that was number one. Number two, I've always valued companionship. And again, the gift too of singleness, as Paul actually says, hey, I actually prefer or suggest that's the way to go. Jesus says the same thing. Obviously, those two individuals were single because you're able to do more for the kingdom. Right. But they also said, like, hey, this might not be something that everyone can do. The other reason, keeping it 100. I like sex. We went there.
Oh God, this is awkward.
So just keeping it real. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to get married. Lord said, "Be fruitful, multiply," but He desires it in the context of marriage. Yeah. You know, and that's something that I always wanted to honor. You know, and do that well. But that was definitely one of the biggest things that I valued. I value companionship, and I just love that you're a partner, you know, for me. Yeah. That you're an equal, and there are things, even though we believe in the context of a biblical marriage, even though we believe that the man is quote unquote the head, I've never looked at that as dominance. Yeah. I've always seen that as that's the role I have to submit to in terms of responsibility. Yeah. Because the Lord's going to hold me accountable to that. And even though I'm called to lead you, there's still a lot of things in life where I look to you for your leadership. Right. Because there's things that you're gifted in and things that I'm not, and that's where I have to submit. Right. You know, so you have a gift of discernment. I feel like
with us, it's been a good mutual of, like, even like this past week, you know, something happened and I'm like, and you're just like, okay, hey, well, let's talk this out. Like, is this really the appropriate reaction? Yeah. You know, of you freaking out, or like, how can we go before God? And I kind of want to redact something I said earlier. Like I said, I knew I wanted to be single forever. I didn't know I wanted companionship. That's good. Because I wasn't provided proper attachment, so I didn't know what that looked like, and I didn't think it's something that I could have. So it was easier to kind of do life alone and look at life like in a singular form. Mm-hmm. So it's not that I was like, oh, I want to be, you know, like single forever. It was, I didn't realize, like, hey, there's a part of you that does want companionship. Like, that's not a conversation I had with myself. I think until we like really sat down and talked about it, because I knew like if we were to start dating, like it wasn't going to be dating for the sake of dating. And I had to come to a decision of like, okay, am I going to date this person to figure out if they're my future spouse, or am I going to throw away a good friendship just to find out, like, so there was like a lot of layers to it. So I kind of want to redact that statement of like, oh, I thought I wanted to be single forever. And I guess, in a sense, I did think that.
At the time, maybe you did.
Yeah. But it was my lack of awareness of myself and what my, deep within my core probably needed or wanted. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's good. All right. Here's a good one. We can maybe go back and forth with it. What are 3 things, just the ones that come to mind, what are 3 things in the over 9 years we've been married now that marriage has taught you?
I am definitely more patient than I thought.
Okay. Wait, well, let's elaborate on that.
No. Okay. So the first thing I would say, it truly is a refining of self. Because for as much as I've literally told God, like, I'm not apologizing first. You can tell him to come apologize to me. And like sitting there in the Holy Spirit being like, okay, let's talk this through, sis.
Yeah.
So like really refines the things out of you that you think are so right. And like, no, this is who I am. This is like, this will never change. Like, those things get refined out of you. Like, it literally puts a mirror in front of you and you're like seeing things and you're like, so that's what I'm like.
So you said refinement, basically.
Yeah, it's refinement.
So okay, before you keep going, because I want to caveat off of it, because my first one, you said refinement. I like yours. Mine was which is similar.
Yeah.
For me, dying to yourself.
Yeah.
It's we're using different terms, but the reason why I want to say die to yourself, it's we learned this from Tim Ross. We never, when you get married at an altar.
Right. I was like, nothing that comes to an altar is there to live, it's to die.
Correct.
Yeah.
And he's the first person I heard him teach it through that context.
Yeah.
I was like, that's so true.
Yeah, like when you read in the Bible, like nothing that came to an altar came to live. Like you brought it there to kill it. And so if you're at the altar of marriage, then you're constantly dying to yourself. You're killing yourself.
And not only are you there to die, right, or to bring something to die, it's an offering, right? And
marriage is death, y'all.
Well, it's an offering, right?
Yeah.
And it's a sacrifice,
yeah.
Which is the word you said at the beginning.
Yeah.
There's a difference between sacrifice and compromise.
Right.
Right. Compromise is, I want 100% of this one thing. I can't get 100, so I might only get 50% of it, or 20% of it.
Okay.
That's compromise. Yeah. Sacrifice is, I want 100% of this, and I get 0%.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to get all tissy about it, because I care about the person to sacrifice the 100. Like you said, not from a quid pro quo, but it's like, you know what? I love you enough to die for this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the first thing for me, was die to yourself. Oh, we have something over here, ladies and gentlemen.
I am so, we shouldn't do talking and walking because I'm so enthralled by what I see around.
I know, right? I have a little treasure hunter. I'm very curious to know if he's going to find something.
I'm going to throw my wedding ring over there and be like, oh, you found it.
It is entertainment out here. But no, I like that. So your first one was refinement.
Yeah, it truly does refine you as a person. Like the other thing I would say is, I've learned I am capable of doing the hard things, and I'm just like, oh no, that's not within my nature. And I think it kind of goes in line with refinement, is the things I thought I couldn't do, I've learned I can do. Including apologize first. Even when you were so right,
Yeah.
No, though, like, it has taught me that, hey, those things you thought were so hard, like, if you just give it some effort, then you can actually do it.
Yeah.
It's no different than training a new muscle. when you are working out. So
Yeah.
What's your number 2?
Let's see. What's the second thing marriage has taught me? The second thing that marriage has taught me is, you alluded to it a little bit, but how there's things that you're gifted in that I'm not. There's things that I'm gifted in that you're not. And so many times people look at that and use it to be in competition with each other. And so I would say marriage has truly taught me, I guess that's where the mutual submission comes into play.
Yeah.
So if we have an unhealthy mindset of what that means, you know, because let's be real, in the church we hear it all the time, wives submit to your husbands, so on and so forth. Yes, that is in there. But the part that's after that, it says, husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church, and there's a whole teaching behind that. But it's just the reality of, it's my job to love you so well that you should feel the love of Christ through me.
Yeah.
Right? So if I'm leading you in that sense, why would you not want to submit to me, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, that's assuming that I'm submitted to the role. Correct. I have to be submitted to Christ.
Right.
Which is actually the verse before all that.
Yeah.
It says, furthermore, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Right.
So the husband actually still submits.
Yeah.
You know? So in our first probably 2 years of marriage, there are certain things that you would see that I wouldn't see. And part of it's because like one of my gifts, strengths, but also can be weaknesses, I see the best in people, I see the best in things, and I can be overly optimistic.
Yeah.
So because I recognize that, I have learned to submit certain things that could be a blind spot, which is a blind spot for me, to you.
Yeah.
So I go, hey, this is what I see in this situation, but I want to bring you over and see what you see.
Yeah.
And lots of times, what I've even done a better job at is I won't even tell you. I just want to bring you around.
Right.
And after, because I don't want to unintentionally shape, you know, a perspective on something.
Right.
I just want you to come in cold turkey.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so when you say something, I'm like, oh, there's a thought that I hadn't had before.
Yeah.
And many times you're spot on.
Yeah.
To which I find myself going, oh, I'm so glad I listened to my wife.
Yeah.
That doesn't make me any less of a leader. That doesn't make me that doesn't question my ability to lead you, simply because I'm inviting you to a process of something that you might have some perspective or foresight on in an area that I don't.
Yeah, and honestly, like what it does is it helps you from having to go through extra steps of pain.
Yes.
Because you're like, well, my wife thought XYZ, but I'm still going to do it anyways. And then
You just gave me my third one. Go ahead.
And just it brings you into a space where you like, you know, you often hear people are like, oh, marriage is hard, marriage is hard, marriage is hard. And I'm like, I think you make it harder than it needs to be certain times because you don't want to die to yourself and your ideas of what a relationship should be like, or what, you know, things like that. And I'm by no means am I saying like sacrifice is not easy. So in that sense, marriage is not easy, you know. But if you just take, like when I used to meet with people for like any kind of care, or like, I guess you could call it pastoral counseling, I don't know, like
pastoral care.
Yeah.
Basically biblical counseling.
Yeah. Like the one thing I always used to do is I have 1 year listening to the person who's talking to me, and of the other year I am listening for the voice of the Holy Spirit. You know, and I think having that same mentality is just like, hey, let me listen to what my spouse has to say, but also let me confirm this with the Holy Spirit, because when it's spot on, the Holy Spirit will confirm it. You know. So which leads me to my third thing, which is marriage can absolutely be fun when you're married to the right person and when you allow yourselves just to have fun. You know, again, not easy. Not easy, because everything comes with its set of challenges. Like, so if I want to have summertime fine body, I have to make the sacrifice of giving up the Ferrero Rochers. You know, there's so many sacrifices I do have to make for my body type specifically in order to achieve what it is that I want. But in the process of it, it's not an absolute drag either. So I look at it the same way for marriage as well. People are like, oh, we're so serious all the time. And it's like, man, like, we laugh all the time. Like, even over the stupidest things, you know? Like, what was it? I was filling out some paperwork the other day, and I see it, and I'm about to go in, and Mark's like, and I'm like looking at him like, I see it, you know, and we just both busted out.
Oh, because I was pointing at it in a way like you couldn't see it?
Yeah, because you're like right there, and I'm like,
sometimes our eyes be shot, y'all. I was like, I'm just trying to help. Like, you got it? You see it?
And I'm like, I see it. And we just both looked at each other and busted out laughing.
Well, the look you gave me was like, I will murder you if you don't stop. But she was also like, but you're right, I needed help.
Like, because there was a part of me that knew he was doing it to annoy me. And I was all like, okay, keep trying me. This WWJD is a little different. So.
Oh man, that's funny. Well, okay. So you actually gave me 2. I'm gonna cheat. So I guess 4. So I guess it would lead me then to say this. My number 3 then would be, you have to be friends.
Yeah.
Like, and it's funny. This is something that just happened organically for us. So I do want to be clear and say this. We were pretty much best friends. Go check out our story.
Pretty much.
I'm not gonna record that whole thing, but
I was your only best friend.
But essentially, because it was so organic, I did not recognize how helpful that would be.
Yeah.
And you even said it just casually in, I guess, our vows / speech to each other during our reception. You know, after we got married, you said, I'm really glad I married my best friend because I can talk to my best friend when my husband's pissing me off.
Yeah.
and it's true, you know. So one of the greatest gifts that marriage taught me was this isn't just your spouse, you know. So fellas, it's not just your wife. Ladies, it's not just your husband. Like, this is truly my best friend. And friendship, that's probably the reason why it doesn't feel like there's been hard moments, of course, like anything.
Yeah.
But there's never been a patch where I've questioned, like, man, are we gonna make it?
Right.
Is it, you know, once we said I do. Did I wrestle with that during the dating phase? For sure. But ever since we said I do, I haven't had that because I know I have my best friend in my corner.
Yeah.
And so I would say that's one of the other greatest gifts is what marriage has taught me is the importance of growing your friendship and don't stop learning it. The language I use is when you think about a vacation, like your favorite vacation you've ever taken, and you come back home and people ask, how was it? You try to tell them about it. You show them pictures, you show them videos, and it gets to a point where you can show them the pictures, you can show them the videos, you can describe it. Yep, Turks and Caicos for us. You can describe it as best you can, but it gets to a point where you say, what? You just had to be there. Here's what you're saying. You had to experience it. And so essentially, like, the gift of when you take time to, like, really pour into the friendship of your marriage, you're not so much trying to force something to happen. Friendship makes you experience it for what it is. Right. You know? So I'm not trying to remember facts of Turks and Caicos. Yeah. I'm not trying to give this presentation of something. It's, I got to experience it. Yeah. Because I experienced it, there's this personal connection with it. Right. So I would just encourage anybody, don't forget to experience your spouse just for who they are. We do walks like this because it gets us out of the house, and for some reason we naturally just focus on each other and conversation just comes up.
Turtle break.
Nice little creek area. Got little fishes.
What if I fell in here right now?
I would come down and pick you up. The first thing I would ask is, are you okay? And if you are, I'd laugh. Wow. Remember? Because we're friends. Okay, here's a fun one. As we grew in our relationship, what were 1 to 3 things that you had to do to adjust?
I was not used to someone who wants to talk about stuff.
What? What do you think is going to happen in a minute?
My way of dealing with stuff before was just to ice people out. And then a couple of weeks later, we're friends again.
This girl said I was not aware that I had to talk about stuff. And marriage is a thing that in which you learn to do that.
And you're just like,
what? I'm learning something right now, y'all.
like I was not used to that. Like I was not used to just, because we would stay up to like 2-3 o'clock in the morning talking stuff out, and I'm just all like, man, it's just so much more easier if we just ice each other out and come back in a couple of weeks and we bought.
The funny thing is, we buy into the lie thinking that it is easier to ice out when it becomes this looming thing you gotta talk about later. Or because you don't talk about it later, it gets worse later.
Well, you're allowed to believe that.
Okay, go ahead.
So that was, and not that like I minded confrontation, but I was just
it's a different level though.
Yeah,
it's a total different level.
It is
because
like
it's always there.
Yeah, it's more on an intimate level, and it's confrontation on a friendship, whatever level.
Correct.
It's like, okay,
or even like with your siblings, with your parents, friends, you can stiff arm as long as you want.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? In marriage, it's like they're there.
Yeah.
And they ain't going nowhere.
Yeah. And even in dating, like when you're seriously dating, that's like, oh, okay, like it's not something I can ignore. Mm-hmm. It's something I have to face head on. Like,
okay, let's talk about that. What happens when? Because this is me too. What happens when we do ignore it? Let's just land there. Let's just hang there for a little bit. In a marriage, what happens if you just ignore it?
Have you ever seen those videos where women, for whatever reason, they're like, come get my nails done with me or whatever?
Okay.
And they just keep adding layers and layers and layers of nail polish, like gel polish, and before you know it, it's like stacked up to this high. I feel like when you don't address whatever the problem is, that's essentially what you're doing. It's like, oh, I'll not talk about it this time and it'll be okay. Oh, I won't talk about it this time. Oh, I won't talk about it this time. And essentially you're building on top of each other, and then you get to a breaking point and you crack, and then in that, like, something that made you crack could be something so simple, but all of that thing that you were building up just comes gushing out.
Yeah. So you're not responding to the one thing, you're responding to everything. Right,
and which is also, I mean, even though your partner did it, it's not fair to your partner that they didn't have enough time to fix it along the way, and you expect them to fix it right there and then, which leads to resentment, and just not liking each other. Me and my ex, we're friends now. Hi, I know you watch the podcast. But like one of the things that we did in our young age was we never really talked about the problems. We just kind of glossed over it and kept glossing over it, and then it just came a day where you're just like, oh, man, like I'm breaking up with you, so I do think I know, as uncomfortable as it is to sit there and tell someone, hey, that bothered me, or this is what's bothering me about our relationship status, because there is a lot of women, I'm starting to realize as I'm talking to them, they have this fear that if they bring something up, they're going to come across clingy or needy or just naggy. And I do think there is a time and a space to do stuff, but there is nothing clingy, needy, or naggy about putting out your expectations.
Well, I think that's what leads to so many unnecessary challenges, or necessary challenges, but going through the challenge becomes harder to navigate than it needed to be.
Right.
Simply because we wouldn't communicate what it is that I needed from you.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having standards. Like that's what I keep telling all my young adult friends. They're like, oh, well, I'm not going to mention anything, huh? So I'm like, there's nothing wrong with having standards and communicating that.
So the crazy thing is, like, you save so much time by communicating the standard,
absolutely.
Or at least vocalizing what you would like to happen.
Or even if you say like, oh, I'm gonna let it go this time, the thing is, if you're willing to let it go one time, like if you're willing to waver on your standards or let it go the first time, you're also going to be willing to let it go the second, the third, and the fourth time, and next thing you know, you're at a place where you absolutely cannot stand this human being, and it's like, how did I get here?
Right.
Well, there were so many times along the journey you were willing to let it go.
Yeah.
And not like, it was more uncomfortable to just do it right there and then and say like, hey, this is not something that works with the person I am or the person I'm trying to be. So instead of having that conversation, it's like, I'll just let it go.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Well, and it's also a reminder too, in those moments, if I'm not willing to speak up on something that frustrates me, then I'm actually the main contributor to the problem now.
Right.
You know, it's one thing if you're noticing something that you do life with and they're constantly doing it over and over and over again. Right. You have said something and they do basically nothing about it.
Right.
That's a totally different story. But if you're going to hold that stuff in, you are the main contributing factor then to your own problem. Right. And that's not actually fair to the other person. And so, language I've used before is, am I being held to an expectation that was never communicated? Right. Because had I known that my actions or my words or when I do this thing makes you feel less than, I would have never done it. Right. You know, I would have loved an opportunity to fix it. And so essentially what you're saying is, the quicker you talk about it, you're providing an opportunity for that person to not just so much fix it, but to better serve you and love you well. Yeah.
And when you're with the right person, that conversation gets easier with time. Like now it's not even like a thing for us to be like, hey, I need to talk to you about something, whereas if we're with the wrong person who is not willing to grow with you, they will, absolutely gaslight you. They will make it seem like, well, gosh, your standards are too high, or you need too much from me, and blah, 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 when in reality, you were just trying to set a foundation and have expectation management. So yeah, that's really good.
I know for me, dang it.
Is it the fact that I randomly woke up in the middle of the night asking what day and what time it was?
Oh man, that's hilarious that you still do that. You actually did it again this past week.
Did I really?
Woke up, you weren't even asleep for a whole hour. You went, what day is it? Oh my goodness. Fun times. Dang it, I had it and it escaped me.
Oh, he's getting up there in age. He's forgetting stuff.
Just remember, if I'm getting old, you're getting older. Yeah.
Keep talking.
Dang it.
What is the one thing you really had to get used to being married to me? My charm. My beauty.
Your beauty is amazing. Well, the bigger thing, the question was like adjust. I think, here we go.
The fact that I like to go to bed by 9 p.m.
that actually has been an adjustment because I'm a night owl. So I think for me, really recognize, not that I knew this when we were friends, but it became even more important when you became my wife, but really recognizing that you are my safest place. So when you're talking about, for the women to share things with their husbands, sometimes they don't because they can feel clingy or whatever. Yeah. So I kind of want to offer something similar to men, a similar challenge to men, but from a different perspective. Sometimes men don't share certain things with their wife because they feel like they're going to get outed or put down, or be thought less of as a man. And it's not saying that the woman can't be upset about that thing, but you've never shamed me though, sweetheart. Yeah. You don't shame me. You don't disrespect me. You don't belittle me. You can be disappointed, and you're allowed. Of course you can. You know what I mean? You can be. It doesn't mean that you can't be upset. You've expressed frustration. You've expressed disappointment. You've expressed anger appropriately. Yeah. But you've never shamed me in your anger. You've never condemned me in your anger. You have never put me down or disrespected me in your disappointment or your frustration. Right? Yeah. Whether just or unjust. And so the thing that I had to really learn to adjust to is, do I trust that? Right. And if I do trust that, then it requires me to be a little more vocal. Yeah. So that's been a huge thing for me to adjust to, and maybe not huge, but huge in the sense of recognizing the importance of it. Yeah. because the health of not just your marriage but any relationship is predicated off how safe you feel with your partner.
Right.
So it requires two things then. It requires, one, are you willing to be open and transparent and vulnerable in everything in life with your partner? And then as the recipient, what are you doing as the wife and / or the husband to be that safe place for them?
Yeah. And I think it starts in dating. Like, you know, a lot of the people that I talk to, they're like in the dating phase, and it's like you really practice in dating so you can put it in work in marriage, you know.
Yeah.
That's why I say, like, if you have someone who is not willing to honor things that you have set forth, then it is okay to say, like, hey, it looks like we're at a fork in a road.
Yeah.
Like, either it's a way forward or this is where we call it, you know, because you don't want to get to a marriage and be like, hey, this is where I call it, you know. So yeah, I think like dating is like the practice field, you know. It's the rehearsal so that you are showing up as the best and fullest version of yourself, or as much as possible after the I do's. So
yeah. What maybe one or two pieces of advice would you give to someone who's currently dating? Like, knowing everything you know now, what's something that you would tell anyone who's in a dating relationship right now with the goal and heart and intent to be married?
yeah, don't ever compromise your standards. I can't emphasize that enough. I think I've spoken to so many people in the past couple of years where, again, they're just willing, like, there is no perfect partner. We are well aware of that. And one of the things I always tell anyone I speak to is just like, make a list. It can be as detailed as you want it to be.
It's funny, I had this thought and I know we were going to go there, because some people are anti-list.
Right.
Like, you have a lot of people are like, stop making a list.
Right.
So what are you referring to when you say that?
So when I say make a list, it's just all like, man, when I see my life 10 years from now, married, with kids, whatever, what type of partner do I see myself sharing this with? Is it the guy who is career minded? Is it the guy who's going to be a great dad? Is it the guy that loves the Lord, has a great sense of humor? So I think every one of us has like non-negotiable. We never ever say it out loud. You know, there's a girl named Clark on TikTok.
That's part of the problem, is your point, because you don't say it out loud or you don't write it.
And like, I was gonna say, this girl named Clark on TikTok, she just lays it out, and she's just all like, if me having standards is what's gonna keep me single, then I'd rather be single.
Facts.
And I was like, I couldn't have said it better. So if you're in the dating phase, like, have standards and hold to it. Don't ever compromise your standards because someone made you feel too clingy or too needy or too whatever.
So when you say list, you're not talking about physical attributes.
Not necessarily. And if that's
you're talking about internal, because I've noticed the people who say stop, like, throw your list away.
Yeah.
What I've noticed is that people are saying that, and because I'm thinking to myself, like, why would you not want to have, you know, checklist of the person you want to commit the rest of your life with? Come to find out, people who are making lists was things on, like, physically based.
Yeah.
So it had to be a certain height, have a certain skin tone, and they had to have, you know, a certain eye color or something like that.
Right.
That's essentially what it sounded like they were referring to.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Whereas for us, all of ours was based off, like you said, the internal.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So, like, for me, y'all, I had sense of humor. I don't care how knowledgeable you are in the scripture, if I can't laugh with you, and if we can't watch an episode of Parks and Rec together, like, that's just not somebody I want to tie the rest of my life with. You know? So,
like, I've even told girls, like, hey, if you want to be vain, like, when you're starting off the list, like, try add the vanity piece of it too. The point is to put down what is important to you, and then later, with each passing day, month, whatever, you get to refine that. Right? Like, The first list I wrote versus the one I actually refined is totally different. Because there's parts of me
You've
that
grown.
right. There's a part of me that made the list because it was from a place of hurt. You know, well, this is everything I experienced, so I don't want none of this. Right? To being like, okay, now my internal systems have calmed down. I've grown up a little bit more. I've learned from this experience. So from what I've learned and from what I've experienced, what would I like the long term to look like?
Yeah.
So I knew for a fact, like I just said, I don't want to be with someone who would disrespect me in any way, disrespect my family.
Yeah.
You know, is family minded, you know, but not wrapped up in their family the whole time. Like, because the whole concept is we're starting a family, you know. So life will teach you stuff, take it with you and make notes of it. So when I say make lists, it's like your non-negotiables, you know. So what are those? It's okay to have it.
So one of the caveats I would say to your list, because a question that has been asked often is, what do? Do you still keep dating them if they're missing one thing from the list? So I'm gonna give 2 answers. My response is, if it were me, I move on. So things on my list were things like, you know, it has to be Christian, equally yoked, family oriented, wants to have kids, sense of humor. But one of the biggest ones too that was on there has to be supportive of the military lifestyle. I was going active duty at the time, and guys, it wouldn't be a good look, and it probably wouldn't be a healthy marriage if I marry someone that has all those things, but they're not supportive of the active duty lifestyle. You're gone a lot, whether it's training or deployment. We were long distance for 3.5 years. And we spent 3 months of that time together. So why would I tie myself to somebody that values everything else on the list, but not that?
Right.
So for me personally, if you're missing one, I'm sorry, it's not gonna happen. That's my answer. I said I'm gonna give 2 responses. So here's my second one. The second response is, if you're willing to stay with the person and they're missing one thing, you know, on the list, here's what I would say then. You're no longer allowed to hold them accountable to that thing that you hope from them.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So for example, like
that can be the thing that you throw in their face because you already knew what was
exactly
on the dinner table.
Exactly. So for example, you want kids, but the other one doesn't. That's huge, right?
Yeah.
So it's fine if you want to stay with them and move forward with that, but then you can't hold that accountable to them. That's not on them, especially if they were clear on what it is that they wanted versus, you know, what you wanted. So that's why I say, for me, if I'm answering it, I'm not sacrificing that. It's on the list for a reason.
Right.
You know? But if not, that's fine. But then you can no longer hold that person accountable.
Right.
You
And
know?
of course, like, I want to add things like there are certain things that's on your list and, you know, you both agree on it and life happens. Like, for example, like, you know, once you get married, you find out there's like infertility issues or whatever. Like, then you can't also make your spouse feel like trash for that. But like, well, we agreed that we're gonna have kids. Like, well, that's something they can control. You know. So I would also just kind of add that in there. It's just all like agree on it, but knowing that, hey, like, there's a possibility of things changing.
That's fair.
You know.
That's good. That's fair, babe.
So yeah, just a little.
No, that's good. That's good. All right. We can probably, as we close or start to land the plane, what are some pieces of wisdom, advice, words of encouragement would you give to a couple that's in their first 2 years of marriage?
Oh, have fun, man. Just have fun. Like, you have the rest of your life to. I know that sounds like such careless advice, but really, like, you don't have to have it all pinned down the first year. We're still learning things about each other 9 years later. And that's okay. You're not going to fully know everything about your spouse the first year. You're not going to fully figure out your systems and processes. And once you figure it out, it's going to change again. You know, like once you add the whole kid factor, or like you have a spouse that gets sick along the way. Like, so have fun. Don't take it too seriously. You're not going to figure it all out the first year. And
learn to just appreciate the moment. I think oftentimes we get cocky in thinking that tomorrow is promised, even when we're young and healthy, and that's not always the case. Anything can happen. Like, I sometimes drive away from our apartment knowing that, man, this could be my last drive. Anything can happen. Like, it doesn't have to be your own fault. So learn to appreciate the person that God has given you. Learn to live in the moment. Yes, there's like so many things that you could change and millions of dollars to be made, and all of those are realities, yes, but like there's nothing like the moment. Because there's nothing like getting to the end of your life and saying like, man, I still had so much I wanted to do. And like, because you didn't, because you were just so like, well, what about tomorrow? What about tomorrow? What about tomorrow? Like, you just didn't spend enough time with today, And honestly, it's not good for your nervous system to be so like caught up in that. So like, it feels superficial to say those things.
No, it doesn't.
But that's what I would say. Don't take things too seriously. Learn to just love your spouse where they are. Like, of course you marry people for their potential, but like, you don't reach potential overnight. It takes hard work. It takes just honing your craft per se, So I think that's what I would say.
That's good. That's very well said. I was gonna say money isn't everything. Like, obviously, yes, be secure, which leads to the other point. Feels like a contradictory statement. Get on a budget.
Well, that's not contradictory, because you're saying money is not everything.
Right.
However, the one that you do have, be good steward of it.
Correct. It's and what I mean by that is sometimes here's why I said money isn't everything. Sometimes we chase the things in front of us at the expense of the greatest thing right next to us. And I'm not saying to not have ambition. I'm not saying to not have goals, dreams, have all those things, even more so if the Lord has birthed that and placed it in your heart. But don't do it at the expense of leaving your spouse. Don't do it at the expense of the beautiful relationship that you have and that you want to grow. Because when that's gone, she's still going to be here. He's going to be here. That's what we're hoping and trying to live towards the goal as. So money is not everything.
I was going to say, I was talking to one of our friends, and it was something silly, like they've been wanting to buy a big purchase item, and they're like, well, what if I need that money later? I'm like, that money can always be made back. Like, but the satisfaction of knowing that this is something you've thought about and worked on for so long, and then you spend that money to buy it, it's like a whole different thing, because this is feeding into the character development of you, like to your hobby, whatever. So like, for me, it's like, hey, if I can make the money back, I'll make it back. But I'm not gonna get moments back. I'm not gonna get memories back. So it's like, we, like, it's not a hard, fast rule, but like for us, it's like, hey, if we can do it, we do it. So it's just, life is way too short to be like strategizing every moment.
Which kind of goes to my second point. If you get on a budget, you're able to, and the infamous statement, if you live like no one else, you can live like no one else. There are things, you and I are still living in the fruit of decisions we made in the first years of our marriage. To this day, we're still living in that. We're in year 9 right now. Because we got on a budget, we paid off 36 G's in 18 months on one income. We got laser focused, and because of that, there are things that we're still able to do. We've never, in the 9 years of our marriage, we've never had 2 full-time incomes. Never. We've been out of debt for years, and we stayed there. We stayed out of debt. And because of that, going back to what you said, that's how you can be able to have fun. You know? So get on a budget, do what you got to do. I'm serious. Make it happen. Be good stewards of what you have. Because here's the thing, you're not going to get more if you're not good with the little. I promise you're not. And if you do, you're just going to squander it. I think it's one of the verses in the Proverbs where it says, "An inheritance now can basically be a curse later."
Yeah.
Because you don't know how to utilize it.
And the truth of the matter is, I'm a big believer that God is not going to give you more if He can't trust you with the little. And
it's the story of the talents.
Yeah, if you haven't been a good steward of the little that you have, and you're like, well, GB, I don't have a lot. Like, in comparison, no, and I think it's perspective as well. Like, compared to what we saw in Nepal and just life outside of the U.S.,
Yeah.
you do have a lot. Like, you actually do, even if it's one thing, you have something.
Yeah.
And if you cannot be a good steward of that, and you're just gonna throw it away and trash it and step on it like, oh, whatever, like, God's gonna be like, man, I gave that to you. Like, so you don't think that's valuable enough, so why would I give you anything more valuable? So that's my whole thing. It's just all like, in order to have much, you have to be faithful in the little. And I know that's like so silly. Like, that's part of the reason why I even put my cart back when we go grocery shopping. And I'm just like, it's just a simple thing to do, because I'm like, now I'm looking out for all the cars around me. It's something silly that I do, and I'm just like, man, I just need to be faithful in just putting my grocery cart back after I shop every time. And trust me, the temptation is there to just leave it and drive off. But I always have to tell myself, like, be faithful in the little things, so that when the big things come, like, you are seen as a good, accountable, trustworthy person.
Yeah. That's great, babe. Well, I think that's it.
Yeah. I'm
That's
hungry.
good. We've been going for a minute. Are you?
I'm hungry.
I'm getting there. I guess I can eat. Any other final words or good takeaways? Additional takeaways?
No.
Cool.
No.
Well, thanks for joining us, guys.
Bye-bye.
Peace.